Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Smiley Talk, The Art of Science and Happiness. Today, I will be interviewing my excellent panel all about the ways we can live happier lives and the way they help others to do this. Before that, let me introduce Smiley Movement. At Smiley Movement, we aim to tackle the big issues in society by matching the people and organisations who can help solve problems with others that need solutions. We want to make it as simple as possible for anyone, anywhere around the world to get involved via our unique social network. It couldn't be easier, and everyone is welcome to take part. For more information, you can head to our website, smileymovement.org. Today, I'm going to be speaking to our brilliant panel: Vanessa King, Head of Psychology and Workplaces at Action for Happiness; Victoria Johnson, Co-founder and Director of the Museum of Happiness; Caroline Jones, Creative Director and Founder of ILLUMINATE Productions; and Georgia Dodsworth, Founder of World of Self-Care, who you probably know better as Self-Care Queen. Welcome, all of you, for joining us today. To get started, if you could just briefly sort of introduce who you are and what it is you do, starting with Vanessa.
Hi, yeah, sure. Well, it's great to be here. Lovely. Hello, everyone. So I'm Vanessa King, and I lead at Action for Happiness. Well, let me introduce Action for Happiness first. So Action for Happiness is a social movement. It's a charity. It's about helping people really take action to build their own and others' psychological well-being. We've been going for about 10 years now, and we were founded interestingly, by an economist, because it felt that the way we were measuring progress in society wasn't really great. It was only based on financial, but not the things that actually make life worth living. So what I do is I take all the research. There's been masses of research, and I know we'll talk about that later, that is coming out of studies and making it really, really practical and usable for people to put into action in their own lives, in their schools, in their workplaces, in their communities, and really kind of educating people, if you like, about what makes most difference in terms of our daily actions. So, yeah, my background is having studied psychology, but worked in business for many years. I trained as an accountant, worked in consulting, but I came across all this emerging science of well-being about 12 years ago now, and so decided to go and study it. So I went to study at University of Pennsylvania with Martin Seligman, who's the founder of the field, and have enjoyed putting that stuff into practice ever since. So hopefully we'll share some thoughts and ideas for everybody today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. Victoria, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi, everybody. I'm Vicky. I'm co-founder and director of the Museum of Happiness, and really excited to be here. Very grateful. The Museum of Happiness is a not-for-profit social enterprise where we share the science and art of happiness in playful and reflective ways. And we've been doing this for about 5 years now. We were actually really heavily inspired by Action for Happiness. I was volunteering for them and going to their talks. And they say, what action can you take? And I was working with young people in mental health at the time, and I was really, really, really saddened and shocked by the really high levels of poor mental health within young people. And I just thought, oh man, there must be more preventative ways that we can look after our mind, our emotional well-being. It doesn't have to be quite so heavy and heady as well. Can we kind of, explore ways to look after our mental health that's engaging and fun, and discovered that there was a whole load of science and art and history to happiness. Just started doing that with the young people, did various different trainings in compassion and mindfulness and positive psychology, and just really found that this really works. And so our kind of ethos is to make it a little bit playful, and we do this now in schools, in workplaces, and we train happiness teachers to go and do what we do as well.
Incredible. Georgia, would you like to tell us a little bit about what it is you do?
Yeah, so I'm Georgia. I'm founder of World of Self-Care, and I do a lot of workshops and talks around mental health, self-love, and self-care. I have a lived experience with mental health. I have a personality disorder, and I speak about that as honestly and as open as I can, just to educate and inspire people. I work with Mind Charity, Time to Change, to kind of really make more inclusive workplaces and make workplaces more accessible for mental health. I also do a lot of body positivity stuff over on my Instagram. So yeah, do check me out there.
That's great. And Caroline, would you like to introduce what Illuminate Productions is?
Hi. We started off Illuminate Productions just over 15 years ago. I came from an arts background, did an MA in painting, and then obviously being an artist, most of your friends are artists and musicians. And I was interested in site-specific artwork and also the history of areas and also communities. So we started building shows that were to engage quite a diverse audience. So they weren't just the art lovers, it was about local community and local community making that thing happen. So, and also telling the story of, you know, the history of an area. And over the years, what we found through doing multiple different types of things, including public artwork, which was placed in the river or on the bridges, to, you know, an art piece that was in the Olympic Park in 2012, to smaller scale things in disused buildings. But the one thing that kept cropping up was about community and needing community to make something happen. But also what was more successful, I found, and so did the rest of the team, was artworks that made people feel something. So it was more about art not being an object, it's about being an experience. So just to, instead of me going on and on about it, I'm just going to show this short video, which was a piece that we did we've done it a few times now because it's so popular, which is where someone puts an EEG headset on. So the participant comes in, they put the headset on, which monitors their brain activity, and then they're asked to think about something that that they really care about and to really focus. And by doing that, that will change the lights and the sound. So it's working with a light artist and also a sound artist stroke composer. So anyway, I'll show you. So these are the participants' reactions as soon as they come out.
Thinking about one thing that I thought I could focus on a lot, and then I wasn't getting much reaction from it, so I decided to focus on something else which is really powerful and profound in my life. And then it started moving a lot more, and the sounds, and almost kind of the sounds reflected.
It's definitely the best thing I've seen this year. Really good.
Excellent. That was incredible to watch. So I thought we would start with one of the bigger questions, but an important one for this discussion. You know, we're talking about the art and science of happiness. What is happiness and why is it so important? Vanessa, do you want to go on that? I know you have a lot of feelings on why it's so vital.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's a really interesting question because it's the sort of thing, how many of us sort of say, well, if I have to choose one thing in my life, I want to be happy, or, I just want to feel happier. We throw this word around a lot, but we don't actually spend much time thinking about, well, what does that really mean? And what does that really take? Our instant thoughts are often the way the sort of behaviors, the things that we do that we think will help our happiness, and more often all around pleasure, and things that we get an instant hit of a feel-good hit, and that's part of it. It's part of it. But if we only focus on that, actually, in terms of the kind of deeper, richer sort of experiences of happiness and longer-lasting sort of happiness, it's not the full picture. And the ancient Greeks talked about this idea of eudaimonia, eudaimonic happiness, which is actually around a sort of sense of deep fulfillment, a sense that we are really using the best of ourselves. And we're part of something bigger. We're contributing to something sort of meaningful, if you like, in our lives. So, and that's a journey, you know, and of course that doesn't always feel pleasurable. So the pleasure along the way can really help. But the interesting thing is that, I mean, when I first studied psychology, which is quite a long time ago now, people really didn't even think about happiness or didn't take it seriously from a research perspective. But in the last 20 years or so, people have really started to realize that feeling good, feeling happier, is not actually just a nice to have. It's not just a good feeling. It actually seems to do us good. We know that people who are happier are physically healthier. They're more likely to take care of their health, less likely to catch a cold, less likely to heart disease, may even live longer. They're likely to do better at work or in school and education. They are more likely to contribute to their communities and help others. They're even more likely to vote and participate. So there's a lot of benefits coming through that we know that happiness is an important thing that we need to pay attention to.
For sure. And I guess there's also an element there of happiness, you know, happiness not being something that's frivolous or something that's nice to have, but is actually sort of fundamental to society as a whole, and something we could all benefit from. Is happiness something we have to innately have? Victoria, do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, the people that you work with and how you teach? You mentioned teaching people to become sort of happiness leaders, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So happiness, we really believe that happiness is a skill that can be learned, just like all the other skills. And actually, the mind isn't wired for happiness, it's wired for survival. So that can bring comfort to a lot of people. So we were based in a homeless hostel for a year, working with people that had gone through a lot of trauma, very vulnerable. And I worked with young people that really suffer with their mental health, and ex-military veterans as well. And I think, you know, it can provide comfort. It's like, you know, the mind isn't wired for that. Don't worry if you're feeling negative and critical. And what we help people do is kind of put the welcome mat out for all of the emotions and just help people take care of themselves. So Dr. Kristen Neff has a wonderful phrase, and she says, you know, gets people to ask themselves, what do I need to best take care of myself right now? What's the kindest thing I can do for myself right now? And a lot of what we do with people is trying to help people be a curious observer of whatever's going on for them. So we say to people, you know, what's your internal weather? And people will go, okay, yeah, it's really stormy, or it's, you know, typhoons and volcanoes in there. And we say, you know, you're not your weather. You know, even the word emotions has the word motion in, and there's a sense of impermanence, and knowing that we can survive our biggest storm, you know, our worst storm, our worst weather. We're not our weather, we're the sky, and the sky can hold all of it. So we try to just kind of give people some practical tools and techniques that they can do to best take care of themselves. And we do a lot of things of kind of inviting people to do gratitude practices to help rewire their brain. So the brain will naturally go to the negative and critical. But by practicing gratitude and writing down, you know, 3 good things that have happened that day can help to rewire the brain. So, you know, and when we started doing this, I was thinking, gosh, can I ask ex-military veterans to do this? They're just going to think this is, you know, a bit ridiculous. Or, you know, asking somebody that's been on the streets for years what they're grateful for. You think, gosh, is this going to work? And it really does. It really, really does. Just helping people to access the present moment, to kind of get out of their head ruminating about the past or worrying about the future, and just kind of trying to come into the here and now. So yeah, that's a little bit about kind of our experiences of, we try not to get people to force smiling and joy. It's like, can you just put the welcome mat out for however you're feeling and be that curious observer?
Yeah, I can see Vanessa furiously nodding in the background there. And I guess also something that, you know, something that I've noticed particularly is, especially in Britain, there's a thing my friend Natasha Devon, who's a mental health campaigner, says, that in Britain we don't have feelings, we have tea and tutting, because we don't have the words to speak about our, we don't have the vocabulary to speak about our feelings and emotions. And it seems to me what you're doing is actually creating a safe space where people can sort of actually think about different ways of expressing how they're feeling outside using metaphors or other sorts of language. I wondered how that linked to your work, Caroline. You spoke about the kind of people engaging with the work in different ways and actually feeling something about art being an experience. Have you found that your work has facilitated people being able to understand their mental health a bit better?
Yeah, I really like that tea and tutting. I'm sure a lot of the work in the art world is a lot of tea and a lot of tutting. When we started off, we were talking about communities, and I was working, and I still do, and live in Bankside, which was an area that had huge regeneration, that started just over 20 years ago. And a lot of the old communities that have been, living here for generations felt like they've been really pushed out by, chains of restaurants, bigger places like the Tate Modern arriving. And what they actually enjoyed was going to a corner shop or going to an independent restaurant or cafe and having a chat each day. So when we first started taking over buildings to make them into like arts hubs for a limited amount of time before they were redeveloped, it was all about bringing back the people that used to work in that place or live in that place, or the local people to help out one way or another. So if we needed anything doing, we would ask the local people if they could help. And of course, when we started off, and well, actually still now, charities are always struggling for money. So we were always getting a lot of support in kind from the community and from businesses, local businesses. And the whole thing was about everyone needs to make this happen, unless it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it's always been about the sense of community. So we'd have like people who hadn't actually experienced artwork, that weren't, they had no intention of going to a big, scary art gallery. Yet they would come to a place which didn't look like a gallery because it was a disused factory, or it was an old tunnel, or it's an old schoolhouse, whatever it was. They would be willing to go there and to help out. And over time, we found that we had a lot more people offering. We get an awful lot of people offering to volunteer their time. And we found that a lot of those people were doing it because they wanted to meet other people. They wanted to know the basics about art, but they wanted to meet other people. A lot of those people as well would have mental health issues or just loneliness issues, or they were graduates that needed to learn a bit more, hands-on in the art world. So we've always said we're not about just dumping an artwork on the river walkway and everyone just walking past going, oh, where's that?
Perfect. I think Caroline might have frozen there. But I was just going to say something that I didn't realize was how pioneering ILLUMINATE productions were. They've been running for 15 years now, and things that I've considered just a normal part of living in London were pioneered by Caroline. So Georgia, speaking of arts and mental health and sort of expressing how one feels, I know you come from a sort of arts and particularly a drama background. Did you find that helped your mental well-being particularly?
Yeah, so much. So I think I kind of recognized that I had emotions and recognized that I was struggling with my mental health when I was around age 12. And I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. I came out of the school system as I just literally was just laying in bed all day, really feeling low. And then I went to my local theatre company, which is called the Chicken Shed Theatre Company. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it's an inclusive company in North London. And their kind of belief is anybody and everybody can make theatre and can be involved in the arts. Because when I was growing up, the arts were there and I was here, and it was very like separate. But as soon as I came into Chicken Shed, I just really found myself and found that it's okay for me to be different from my peers. It's okay for me not to fit in. It's okay for me to go against the norm. And I just fell in love with the arts then. So the arts have really helped me. I've just kind of stayed in the arts sector since. And I just think I love the inclusivity, but also the fact that you can express yourselves in a variety of different ways, and that art can be that medium for expression. So in the past, I've done art therapy. Even on a day-to-day, I just do like some creative practices, maybe like some writing, or listen to music. And that can really that goes hand in hand with like my happiness and my well-being and how I'm feeling. And I believe that art should be accessible to everybody. It shouldn't be this thing that is up here that only those people can access. It should be something that everyone can access. So when I talk about self-care or self-love, I'm really talking about tapping into that creativity that we all have within us. Because I think through creativity brings happiness, and I think everything just kind of coexists with each other. So that's my thoughts on it all.
Yeah, I really like what you said just then about the kind of having a few creative practices that you do every day, because I think sometimes when people think about, you know, mental health or creativity, both of those things, they think you have to be, you know, doing a million mindfulness activities a day, or, you know, having to do some big program. But actually it can be something small that you incorporate you know, every single day or occasionally, and can benefit from that. I want to speak to you, Victoria, about the work you've done in schools and with teachers, because I know you've shifted towards that, particularly in light of the pandemic, because obviously physical events can't really happen and those sorts of things. So do you want to tell me a little bit more about how you've been working in schools?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that's so close to my heart. So kind of learning positive psychology and mindfulness and compassion and all this stuff. The biggest thing that came to me was, oh my goodness, imagine if we'd learned this at school, the suffering that it would have alleviated if we were to learn that. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't know how much use things like Pythagoras has really helped me in life. But actually, you know, things around self-care and self-compassion and mindfulness, and just even knowing that we can learn happiness has just been such a game changer. So we're doing that in schools now. So we start with the teachers. So we basically train all the teachers in our program. So we look at how happiness is a skill that can be learned, and the different kind of like happy chemicals of the brain and how to activate them. And like Vanessa was saying, how do we find this sense of pleasure and purpose, and actively, consciously doing things that bring us a sense of pleasure and purpose? Put it in your calendar, really commit to it. So we work with the teachers first, and then we get the school to do a peer-elected happiness youth board. And so the teachers and the youth board, then we do trainings to them in all of these different things around happiness, gratitude, self-care, self-compassion, and then together they roll it out in the whole school. And then each class will create a little museum of happiness for the school. So they'll each submit an exhibit or a display or something, and the parents get to see what they'll do. So they will get invited to a showcase, but in COVID times, they'll get a video. And so we're trying to have a whole school approach. This is a really new thing that we're doing now, which is kind of born out of these kind of, how can we best be of service right now? And the way that we feel we can most make an impact is through schools. And also we've got a happiness teacher training program ourselves. So any individual can come on our online happiness teacher training program, whether they want to just learn the tools and skills just for themselves, just to spread it in their local community, or if they want to kind of start their own happiness organization. So they're the two kind of things that we're doing. And oh my goodness, doing it with children makes my heart want to burst, because they get it. They really get it, like straight away. And they're so intuitive. I often go in the schools with a big earth flag. I don't know if you've seen them, but they don't have all the different countries. It's kind of this sense of we're one earth, one family. And they're just like, yeah, of course. Like, why have we caused all this separation? And at the end, after I teach them the different tools and different things, I say, always get them to do a pledge and a commitment. So what's your happiness pledge off the back of this session? or what's your pledge for greater happiness and peace in yourself and for the world? And this little boy was like, isn't it the same thing really? Because actually the more happiness and peace you have in yourself, the more happiness and peace there'll be in the world. And I was like, oh my goodness, the wisdom from these 9-year-olds, right? So yeah, it's really, really exciting doing it with children, and just even the difference I've noticed of like, they just grasp it. They're used to being in learning environments. So I just think it's so important that this stuff is taught in schools, so that we're working in a preventative level much more than reactive. So if I had learned all these skills and tools when I was 4, and it had just been through primary school, like I learnt maths, English and science, I knew what my difficult emotions were when they were to show up. I could, if I was feeling really down, could I think of something I felt grateful for just to balance it out? Getting into the habit of what do I need right now to best take care of myself, and being able to communicate it to somebody else. It's just life-changing stuff. So yeah, we feel really excited to be doing this in schools, and really, really hoping that eventually this can be something that can be in the curriculum that everybody learns, because I just think it would alleviate so much suffering if we knew how to really take care of ourselves. And John Kabat-Zinn's got a quote, it's one of my favorite ones, and he says, you know, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So it's like just having the tools to be able to ride the waves of the kind of crazy external world we live in.
I think there's definitely as well as the work you're doing, like just generally a move towards understanding that having students who are happy makes often them more, they're more engaged in school, they're more engaged in sort of the things that are going on academically, but also, sports teams and the other things, that's friendship groups, there's less issues there. So it can really benefit schools to, focus on the young people's happiness. And Georgia, I know that you and I are of a similar age. We've sort of just come out of university, and when we were at school, even a few years ago, that wasn't really something that was happening. And you obviously came out of the school system. How much of a difference do you think it would have made had you have been able to learn those school skills at a younger age?
Yeah, I feel like if I was taught about happiness, about a different array of emotions, and about how to actually deal with the day-to-day things of life, I think my experience would have been a lot easier. I just remember that I wasn't taught what the different emotions were. I wasn't taught what depression was. I wasn't taught what anxiety was. I wasn't taught what it means to be happy. In PSHE at the time in school, we weren't really spoken about emotions, or about our thoughts, or about feelings, or about how we interact with others. And that's such a confusing time when you're growing up, especially as a teenager, because you hit puberty and bam, suddenly all of these different emotions, all of these different thoughts. It's like, what do you do to cope? How can you actually express yourself? What's the vocabulary you can use? So I feel like if I was taught that, my experience would have been so much different. So I'm 22 now, 23 next month. But I feel like there is still so much work that needs to happen in schools, even in workplaces, even as in primary schools. Like it affects everybody. And I feel like we all need to have more tools to express ourselves, even if it is how are we feeling today but as the weather, or how are we feeling today but as a color. Things making it more accessible, because emotions can be perceived as these big scary things, or you shouldn't talk about them, or you shouldn't say that you're upset. If someone asks you if you're okay, you should say you're fine. And it's like we've got into this habit of just being like, yeah, I'm okay, thanks, how about you? Okay isn't an emotion. Fine isn't an emotion either. So I feel like we all need to have these conversations about how we're feeling, so other people can understand themselves too. And I feel like the school system, since coming away from that, I really found myself, and I really found myself through sitting in those uncomfortable moments, feeling sad, or feeling anxious, or feeling angry. And I'm so grateful I had therapy during that time, but I know a lot of people don't have access to that. So it is a really, really tricky subject, talking about emotions, talking about happiness, talking about mental health. And I believe just by talking about it from like our own perspectives, we can create this ripple effect, and hopefully more and more people will start to actually understand what's going on in their brains, in their bodies, as well, because I feel like our brains and our physical health are linked together. I don't really see them as separate. our bodies are constantly telling us information about how we feel. And same with our brains are constantly telling our bodies. So I feel like we need to kind of tune into our bodies and our brains. And in turn, hopefully we can create a more kind of open conversation about how we're feeling.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess there's also something to be said there about the way that historically there was people who had poor mental health, and that's when we discussed emotions. It was only when mental health was bad that we ever discussed the feelings and emotions and gave people the tools, whereas there's more of an understanding now that if you give people the tools to be able to communicate and understand their feelings and feel them even, that it might help alleviate poor mental health before it becomes a problem. Vanessa, I know you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, I think it's really, I mean, we really sort of, support everything that's been said so far. But one point I really want to make important is that, if we're feeling sad, if we're feeling angry or hurt, those emotions in themselves are not a problem. So sort of living a happy life, and we tend to, our framework actually is called 10 keys to happier living, not 10 keys to happiness, because life has ups and downs. And at the moment, for example, during COVID, it's not, many people are feeling a sense of anxiety or a sadness that they can't see their friends, and those aren't illnesses. Those aren't, those are just normal feelings and appropriate feelings. So I think it's but knowing that there are part of this kind of understanding, having a greater kind of language around emotions and tuning into them, is also understanding, well, what is that emotion signaling? Because emotions are signals. If I'm feeling sad, what have I lost? Or I'm feeling angry, maybe it's usually a sign of some sort of injustice or values being crossed. And actually some of those feeling those is appropriate in many cases. I mean, a lot of change didn't happen in the world unless people got angry,
Yeah.
But it's knowing when we are feeling those unnecessarily, maybe because of our internal habits of mind. I mean, Albert Ellis, who's founder of, grandfather of cognitive behavioral therapy, said we're remarkably good at disturbing ourselves. So are we generating those worries because we're ruminating or catastrophizing or whatever? And if so, what are the tools we can apply? What are some skills we can learn to get out of that? Or is that something? Am I stuck in that sadness or whatever? And is there something that I can do to help me, to sit with it, to accept it, but also have some strategies that actually can help me along the way. So I think it's really important that we don't send the signal, especially to young people, that feeling anxious or sad or upset or angry or hurt, they shouldn't be experiencing those things. It's the tools, it's the kind of recognizing those are part of life, recognizing when they're feeling those, unnecessarily or getting stuck in them, and having the tools to do something about it. So
yeah, definitely. And you just mentioned, would you like to explain your 10 keys to happier living?
Yeah. So when Action for Happiness was, before Action for Happiness was founded, it was called Action for Happiness, and action, taking action. So we're kind of early. I was involved before it started, sort of founding person, if you like. The clues are we were called Action for Happiness. So what actions are we going to tell people to take? And so what I volunteered to do was go through all the research. I just finished my master's degree in the sort of science of wellbeing and positive psychology. And there was a hell of a lot of other literature. So I went through all of that and found out what are the areas that we can take action in that have most sort of positive impact on our psychological well-being, our happiness, if you like, our mental health, if you like, in a positive way, in a preventative way. It's very preventative, but it's also, we know that there are also things that can help people if they are struggling. So it came up, and the acronym, I'll show you there, is called Great Dream, and people love it because most people really dream of being happier, and of course we dream of having a happier world. And it's a menu. Those are the headlines. Underneath are lots of different ideas of things you can try. There's a mixture of things that we can do in the outside world, like taking care of our bodies, like exercising, like connecting with other people. And that is really important. It connects very much to the work that Caroline's doing. And also the sort of these inner habits of mind. You know, how do we feel about ourselves? How do we talk to ourselves? You know, what are the sources of meaning in our life? What are the kind of our habits of, you know, thinking habits, and are those kind of getting in the way of our happiness? You know, what are the sort of emotional, you know, the emotional skills and things? So there's this inside out, outside in sort of menu of practices, and I'll give a shout out to our calendars at the end of this, because I think people, so each month, to make, because this is, we want to make it really practical, is we've got these calendars that come out based on one of the keys. And in June, they're sort of alliterative. So June was Joyful June. We have 5 million downloads for that. They're translated into about 20 languages. They're free on the Action for Happiness website, Action for Happiness calendar. We're in Optimistic October at the moment. So what are little tiny daily actions can I take to boost my own or somebody else's well-being? And I know there's a headmaster, primary school headmaster in Suffolk, Woodbridge Primary School, who's got a really creative way of playing with that. So he cuts up all the little squares for each day, and he puts them into a little box. And each day he has people pull out one of the little actions at random. So it's quite fun. So yeah, I mean, I really encourage people to do that, because there's lots. What is great about this science is that there are a lot of tiny, small, tiny things that we can do that don't take, you know, hours of our time, but with intention, awareness, and practice can really make a big difference to people's lives.
Yeah, I think what's nice about that as well is that, you know, especially if you're someone who is feeling low or is feeling, you know, not in the best space, it can feel really impossible to do a lot of things. But, you know, the fact that you are able to do small actions and do small things that are achievable make things much, it feels much more hopeful. I want
to just one thing to put in there is that having you know, knowing that there are tiny things that we can do, and even the tiniest action, you know, that we choosing to take a tiniest action is a step towards well-being, because having that sense of agency is really important, because it's when we feel that there's nothing we can do that we start to kind of close in. So it's always, there's a thing called active coping. I mean, doing, basically, which means doing something rather than doing nothing. So even if it's habits in your mind.
Yeah. Caroline, I was wondering if you would tell me a little bit about your social prescribing work that you've been doing.
Yeah, I'm just picking up from what Vanessa was saying as well. You know, a lot of people know Candida Chang's work. She's an artist. But we've worked with her a few times, and just there's a certain piece called Before I Die, and it's just a big chalkboard, and you put them in different areas, you know, on old hoardings or whatever. And it just says, before I die, ... And people would fill them in. You just have the chalk there, you know, the passers-by can fill them in. And we did that project in London Bridge. It was over 5 years ago. And the chalkboard, even though it's huge, would just fill up. You know, within a few hours, people would write over the people's things. Then we were asked by the council to put another board up around the corner, and then we put a third board up in Borough Market. And what I found interesting about the piece was that people like to, well, it gave people a chance to think about if they had to pick one thing they wanted to do before they die. Some of the things you look at and you think, well, that's just a very simple thing that you can achieve, but they've had to focus on what is the one thing. Then other things would be like huge things, which obviously would take, you know, a lot of time and knowledge to be able to do that. But and we did another piece which was a similar thing, which was what makes me happy. You know, what makes someone happy is completely different from what, you know, makes someone else happy. So the reason why I'm talking about those two pieces was because people what we found is the public want interaction. They want to be heard and they want to participate. So if you write on a board, you've had to actually really think about what it is that makes you happy or what you want to do before you die. And then they've written it down, so it sort of verifies it. And then they know other people can come and have a look at that. So it sort of makes people acknowledge them more or something. But because, you know, Before I Die has been to over 100 countries, you know, and it's popular all over the world. You know, the chalkboard it's full up. So
I think that's one of the really cool things about a lot of the work you're doing, is that it is so global. Obviously, Georgie, your work is often online and on Instagram, where you can reach a global audience. I know that the Museum of Happiness has traveled worldwide, and obviously Vanessa, positive psychology sort of originated, or you did a lot of work out in America, and you have an impact. You have an impact around the world now. So yeah, it's really it's a really universal concept that can be approached in lots of ways.
Sorry, just picking up again on something. Years ago, we did a piece which was quite specific to a disused dentist on Borough High Street in London Bridge. And so the artist, Marcus Lyle, we sat in the old waiting room, and we had to work out what would be good. That would be a piece that had interaction, but also encompassed the waiting room and what used to happen in there. So we sat round, and the artist said, well, actually, normally when you sat in a dentist, you're listening for a drill. You sit there, you feel anxious, and you're trying to hear a drill or something. You're getting yourself worked up before you go in. So he came up with screaming, because that's cathartic, but also, a lot of people are afraid of the dentist. So what happened was you'd come in. We kept the reception area exactly as it was before, apart from we just put an orange filter on the light. We had a stroppy actor as the receptionist that would tell people to sit down and wait for their turn. And then you'd be called into the back of the room, where you'd scream as loud as you possibly could, and it would light up the building. It light up the room you're in, but also the whole of the front of the building. Yes. A 4-story building, so it was acting as a public artwork, but it was also a cathartic piece. And I used to sit in there pretending I had nothing to do with the piece quite regularly. And we had over 27,000 people came through. Oh. All the screens were recorded. But what I found interesting was that a lot of people would go in looking anxious, but they'd always come out smiling. Just from the screen. When we were setting up, I was the only girl that was part of the production team. So they said to me, can you scream as loud as you can, because we need to check out the sound levels, because depending on the frequency of your scream, different things happen, the colours change, it will strobe. And I was saying, I'm not going to scream. I've never screamed in my life. I don't want to scream. Made me feel anxious thinking that I had to scream. And they were saying, well, look, it's 1:30 a.m. Who are we going to get to come in now to scream? We need to test it. So I had to scream as loud as I could. And my scream was so high pitched, it was unbelievable, which they use then for the strobe light, if you can get to that frequency. But we did that piece again. We sort of because it was so popular, we did it again in lockdown as a very last minute piece, because all the other projects that we were working on had been postponed, and we knew that people still wanted to interact with artwork. So we got hold of a building in London Bridge again, a different building. The artist worked out a way that people could scream into their phones at home or into their laptop, whatever. And that would light up the building in London Bridge. We had like a live webcam opposite, so people could log on. They could see what was happening to the building in London Bridge. But this was at a time when most people were told, well, everyone was told not to go out, but they could see what was happening, to the lights of the building. But that was, we talk about universal happiness and what makes people happy, or what's cathartic or whatever. But because it was online, it meant that anybody from any country could log on and scream, and that would affect something else in the centre of London. So yeah.
Vanessa, did you want to say something?
Yeah, one thing, because I meant to pick up on something that Caroline said earlier, that I don't think has come out in the discussion so much now, is that human beings are social creatures. We're wired to connect with other people. We know that feeling lonely is really damaging to our physical and mental health. So one of the things that often when people think about sort of happiness practices, it's very self-focused. It's very focused on mothers, but actually, when we connect with other people, our experience of happiness is actually amplified. In fact, we know that when people do sort of kind things or help others, or have a kind of positive experience with someone else, that it actually activates the reward center in the giver's brain as well as the recipient. So, and this coming together, like Caroline said right at her introduction about this community work and the fact that bringing the community together in their place and kind of working together, and it took the community, that connection with other people has both a physiological and a psychological effect that is really fundamentally important to our well-being, because if we are isolated, that really undermines our happiness longer term. So it's thinking of, especially at this time when I've just heard London's going into tier 2 more lockdown, is in our lives in general, how do we feel connected? And how do we at times like this? And it's really interesting that, like, just that last point where people screaming all around the world and then sharing it sort of essentially, that's a connecting experience, because I'm not the only person that feels like screaming, that person over there feels like, and it's connecting, we don't feel alone. So that in work, it's most the process of what we do, like the work that Caroline's doing, as well as the kind of object or experience is really important.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess there's also the element of, obviously, coronavirus has been a horrendous thing to happen, and lots of people became isolated, but also we've seen lots of communities coming together and people engaging and helping out neighbours, and lots of projects of getting off the ground that really focus on community action. And I know that previously I didn't necessarily know my neighbours, but I definitely do now, because we're all having to come together to get through this, and there's something to be said about that as well. I want to go to some of the questions that lovely people have sent in. The first one being, what do you feel about the term emotional and the negative connotations of that? Who wants to go? Georgia, do you want to go? You look like you've got a thought.
Yeah, well, I love the word emotions and emotional. I feel like to be emotional is to be alive. That's what I really think emotions are for. But I cannot stand it if, like, my friends or certain family members are like, oh, you're being so emotional, or oh, you're being really dramatic or whatever, because emotions are there to tell us something, even emotions that we might not want, like sadness or anger. Every emotion is there for a reason. So those are my thoughts about the word. And I feel like with every word, there's always like a negative connotation to it, but it's about how you choose to own that word and how you choose to, I guess, fulfill it in your day-to-day life. So now I've kind of reclaimed the word emotional, and I'm like, yes, I am emotional. Yes, I do have emotions. Yes, there are some days where I'm more emotional than others, and that's okay. So it's about accepting that word, accepting your emotions, and going from there.
I feel like also it's often used to shut down people's, if they're talking about their experiences, particularly women, women, oh, they're so emotional, we shouldn't listen to them, or people, from different backgrounds, like Georgia and I, we both do a lot of work in the LGBT community, and it's often something that's said to us is, oh, stop being so emotional, it's not that much of a deal, and it's a way to minimize people's experiences. Or it's often used in that way. But you're right, Georgia, it doesn't have to be. It can be what you make of it, essentially. So looking at another important question. What is your vision for a happier world? Big question, but we like looking forward. We like some hope and optimism here. I feel like Vanessa has something to say.
No, that's the point of Action for Happiness, really, is, it's a world where people understand what happiness is and have the tools to manage it. But it's a world where we feel our communities are happier. And our worlds are happier. One of at the heart of Action for Happiness is about taking action with and for other people as well as ourselves. And we know from some of the research we've done on some of our programs and courses that it's this effect of coming together with other people is really makes some of the most difference. And we know that communities around the world where people feel that they feel safe, they trust their neighbours, they know their neighbours, and they know that there are some people they can draw on when they, need support or want to share something good or whatever. We know that those communities not only have higher well-being, better physical health, but they're also more resilient, which is really important. So I think I've just contributed to a book called How Positive Psychology Can Help Create a Brighter Future. And so, which is not focused on the individual. It's looking at workplaces, it's looking at schools, it's looking at communities, it's looking at what we do in our spare time, it's looking at the environment, politics, etc. Because these ideas, these kind of principles that are emerging from the science of well-being have implications, you know, at all of those levels. And I actually think we should be putting those at the heart of policy making. We should be the way we design our cities, the way we design our education system, as Vicky talked about so eloquently. You know, that, you know, this stuff has fundamental implications beyond us as individuals.
Yeah, I kind of want to, has anyone else got anything to add before I jump in with another question for their vision? Or are we all fairly united on what a happier, I'm liking this, I'm liking that, Victoria. Maybe that's how we'll end it. I was going to say, Caroline, I know specifically when we've discussed your work in the past, you sort of said that, you know, you never set out with the ambition of 15 years later running this big production company. You sort of did one project and then you did another and then another. What would you say to someone who's got an idea about how they might want to, you know, make a change, but isn't certain about whether they're able to do it?
Well, from my experience, I'm always critical of what I do. But it started off in one project. For me, it wasn't quite right. I could improve it. So I could see the things that, you know, would be much better if they were done in a different way. Other people, you know, would say, you know, we did have really good reviews, really good feedback. Say, oh, I don't know what you're worried about. But for me, it was always about, no, we can improve something. We can always make something better. We can always get to different types of people, involve people in different ways. There's always something more, you know, you just can't stop. There's always something more you can do. And there's more that you can help people and more you can involve people. And it doesn't matter, even if it's a, you know, a little thing. We're doing something at the moment called joy bombing with a new artist. And basically it's a disused shop window where we have the artist has designed, you know, what it looks like with there's actors in the windows with like teddy bear heads and panda heads and things on. And they're there to interact with the people that are walking past unexpectedly. So it's from a distance because of COVID, but it's all about, you know, someone walking past on the way, you know, they're going to work, they're going shopping, and just about getting a quick smile out of someone. And just paying attention. So if someone's walking past and then the actors knock on the window and hold up a card saying you're really special or whatever, just these simple little things bring a smile to, you know, to someone. And it's all, the more they interact, the more they get out of it. And that's like with everything in life, you know, the more, if someone stands there, the more the actors will interact with them, the more they will hold up, the more they will do. But I think life is like that. Everything in life's like that. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Yeah, for sure. Victoria, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I remember kind of 6 years ago being at an Action for Happiness event and the constant question of what action can you take, you know, for yourself, for a happier world? And I had this idea of this museum of happiness and, you know, our inner critics can talk us out of our best ideas, right? It will say lots of different things, package it up in creative ways, but ultimately it will say things to us like, you're not good enough. Like, what do you know about this? You're not good enough. You're not smart enough, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just not true. I think, you know, if I'd listened to my inner critic 6 years ago, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have started. And I think if you have an idea, a little kind of spark of inspiration or a seed that gets planted of inspiration, you have an idea, just listen to your heart, go for it. I think our heads can sometimes talk us out of doing things, but our heart knows. And I think, you know, when I did this, I knew absolutely nothing about how to do a pop-up museum of happiness or any of this stuff. But I think when we're doing something for the greater good of others, I think, you know, some magic happens and doors open. And I think things either go the way that you intend or you learn something. So it's kind of win-win either way. So I would say just go for it. Just do it. If you want to make a difference in the world, you know, I think it was Mother Teresa that said, we may not all be able to do great things, but we can all do small acts with great love.
We've got so many great quotes coming from this. We love a gobbet on this live stream. We're coming up almost to the end of the time, but before we go, I want to find out how we can all get involved with the work that you're doing and how we can best support you going forward. So starting with Georgia, what is it that people can do to find out more about your work and supporting what it is you're doing?
So do check out World of Self-Care. I feel like at the moment I'm going through a kind of transition with it, and I'm kind of making it more bigger and more accessible in many ways. So for the time being, do check out my Instagram page at Self-Care Queen. You can find me on there. I talk a lot about LGBTQ+ education, mental health, body positivity, self-love, self-care. I usually always have like a talk or a panel coming up or an event. So yeah, you can stay updated with me there. And I think the best way as well is to just kind of think about yourselves in this, think about your mental health, think about your happiness, your self-care, your self-love, and your journey going forward. So yeah, do check me out, and good luck on everybody's happiness journey.
Thank you so much. Caroline, do you want to jump in and tell us how we can get involved with the work that you're doing?
Well, at the moment, we've got Joy Bombing on, which is in Bond Street, and that's only on till Saturday. So you've got 2 more days where you can go and interact.
Get in there quick.
Yeah, get in there quick. Otherwise, if you join our mailing list, you'll get once a month or something what we're doing, what we're up to at the moment with our newsletter. And like every other organisation at the moment, things are changing all the time with COVID. So what we are trying to do, and we will do, is carry on doing projects, but with social distancing in place. So we'll always be out there and always be busy. So yeah, log on, see what we're doing, and join us if you want to in any way.
Excellent. Victoria, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're up to? And I know we also had a question asking if you worked with schools outside of London and secondary school. So if you could also answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we work with schools all over the country. So yeah, absolutely. Secondary schools as well. It's something that I'm more than happy to travel, COVID permitting, to do, because it's so close to my heart. It's such regenerative energy. It just lights me up. So yes, absolutely. And then ways to kind of get in touch with us. Yeah, if you join our newsletter on the website, you'll get all the kind of latest news and happiness in your inbox of how to connect with us. We're also going through an upgrade of our website at the moment, so the new one will be ready in a couple of weeks. So I also run a free class every Monday evening on self-compassion and self-care on Facebook Live, and you can join our Museum of Happiness gratitude group as well if you would like to get into that practice and habit and kind of see what other people and share and connect. That's also free. And yeah, if you want to invite us into your school or workplace or be a happiness teacher, you can. So yeah, I think the best way is just kind of follow us on Facebook, connect on the internet, on the website, and join some of our groups.
Excellent. And finally, Vanessa, would you like to tell us how we can get involved?
Yeah, well, the main way is through the Active Happiness website or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. But there's a lot of free resources, which people are finding really helpful at the moment. So there's the calendars, which I've mentioned, available in sort of 20+ languages for free. Download them. Optimistic October, New Things November, which is all about creativity and.
I think we all need some optimism right now.
Yeah, exactly. And we can cultivate it. We can cultivate it even when it's hard. We've got events that happen, the really big, wide-reaching webinars. Our newsletters. The best thing to do is sign up, like everyone, get a newsletter. But we've also got things like there's a free app, which is the calendar. There's a little 10-day free course on the 10 keys. If you want to join those, we've got some online get-togethers as well, where we're bringing people together to talk about, different aspects of happiness and well-being and caring. And there's the books, of course. There's the book for adults and the 10 keys, and the book for children, 7 to 11-year-olds, sort of activity book. They're very activity book based. So there's lots of different ways that we can do. But I think, you know, and also sort of be the change, or if you can. I mean, the biggest way to be part of is sign up for us, but then also go out and do something kind for someone else. I mean, I just challenge everybody listening today. What's something you could do, tiny thing that's really kind for someone else right now, or later on today? So, and then you're part of the movement.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good place to end this. Be kind to someone today and find something small you can do. So that is the end of our panel discussion. Thank you so much for joining me and the all of our audience. We've had people from around the world getting involved and telling us where they're from, which is really nice. So yes, if you have enjoyed this and want to find out more about what Smiley Movement are doing, head to smileymovement.org, where you can sign up, create a profile, and match with a charity or non-profit you might want to help out with. That could be your small kind action for the day, you finding someone that you are able to work with. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and for donating your time. If anyone would like to find out more, you can click the links, which you can find below, for the charities and organizations that our lovely speakers are working for, and find out more how to get involved with their call to actions. Thank you very much for listening, Even, and I hope you have a lovely day.